everyone, it's Dr. K, Writing Under Oath. Welcome to my YouTube channel and to my website of the same name, writingunderoath.com. Please visit and submit a serious theory of nonfiction. This is the second part in a series of videos, this one on the poetic genre called Imagism. After Ezra Pound founded the poetic genre Imagism, he brought a lot of his buddies into the fold and helped them get published in one of the first magazines that published experimental poetry called Poetry. It's still being published today. If you can get a poem published in Poetry, it's like getting a story published in the New Yorker. You are set for life as a writer. One of the colleagues he brought into the fold was William Carlos Williams, an imagist. And one of the poems he wrote is actually a theory of imagism. Most writers eventually publish essays or books that are theories of their process and technique of writing. William Carlos Williams was clever enough to write a short poem that is actually a treatise on imagism, and it goes like this. It's called The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon the red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater, beside the white chicken. I use this poem in my classes a lot to try to explain imagism, and I ask my students to connote and denote the meaning. Denote means to describe the literal meaning, and connote means to describe the figurative or metaphorical meaning of the poem. And students inevitably will talk about how a farmer had a wheelbarrow and he needed to get it in with some chickens before it started to rain heavily, and he had a bunch of cows and some tractors. And as is typical of most of us, before we've studied the scholarship of poetry, we bring in a lot of excess meaning that isn't in the poem. This poem is about nothing more than what it says, which is in line with imagism. It is what it is. William Carlos Williams' slogan was, "No ideas but in things." This poem is about alliteration, how good it sounds to say red wheelbarrow beside white chickens. So much depends upon. These words sound good together, and the stanzas have line breaks that emphasize these alliterations. A red wheelbarrow is redder if it's wet, because the wet glazes the color and brings it out. It's redder beside something very white because the contrast brings out the red, and the red brings out the whiteness of the chickens. So it's an image that uses contrast to stand out, to gleam before the eyes of the reader. And that's all that it's about. But the question remains about the first line, so much depends upon this image. What is it that depends upon this image? The answer to that question is our understanding. That's what depends upon it. Our understanding that this is nothing more than an image. It is what it is. It's about objects that become more beautiful by observation because of the contrast. And that's what William Carlos Williams wanted us readers to know about Imagist poetry. Poetry that is filled with abstractions, especially floating abstractions, are meaningless. What is a floating abstraction? It is an idea that is not linked to a concrete. A concrete is any object in the world that we can point to and say what it is and agree upon that. Some examples of floating abstractions: love is a floating abstraction if it's not linked to a specific gesture or attitude or task. To say that the old sick woman made breakfast for her bedridden husband every day and brought it to him lovingly or with a smile is to link the floating abstraction of love to a concrete behavior. God is a floating abstraction. No one can point to a concrete or object in the world and say that that is God. It's one of the most difficult floating abstractions. Imagism was the first uniquely American poetry after the trend of a European romanticism. These poets got together and they wanted to create a uniquely American poetry, and Imagism was it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Dr. K, writing under oath.